They called her a gold digger the moment she walked into the room, not because of anything she said, but because of the way she carried herself. Calm, graceful, a woman who didn't ask for permission to exist. Behind her back they whispered, "She's only with Liam for the money." They said it with confidence, as if they had read her life like a book. But the truth was something none of them would have ever guessed. Natalie Rowan made her first million before she ever knew Liam Carter existed. Still, people prefer the story that makes them feel bigger. So they laughed. They judged, and they dismissed her with that cruel, lazy certainty people use when they've never built anything themselves. And on the night someone laughed too loudly, called her Liam's little investment, and clinked their glass like it was a punchline, Natalie didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She didn't explain. She simply told the truth, and the room collapsed into silence. Because nothing humbles the judgmental faster than realizing they misread a woman who built a life larger than their imagination. Natalie Rowan had never been easily shaken. She had worked too hard, climbed too far, survived too much for small minds to unsettle her. But judgment, real, quiet, smiling judgment, it hits differently. It doesn't scream. It whispers, and whispers are harder to fight. Natalie grew up in a modest neighborhood outside Pittsburgh. Her childhood was a long stretch of side jobs, borrowed textbooks, and a mother who worked 3 shifts just to keep food on the table. By her late 20s, Natalie had built a thriving online strategy firm, contracts with 7 companies, a dozen employees, and the kind of stress that grows under your ribs like a second heartbeat. But none of that mattered in rooms where people only saw her through the lens of who she was dating. Liam Carter, gentle, humble, stable, a man with a good job, a soft laugh, and the kind of heart that made her believe she could finally stop bracing for impact. Only problem? Everyone assumed she chose him for his salary. They saw a narrative, not a woman. The first misjudgment happened during Liam's cousin's engagement dinner. A long table wrapped in candles, soft jazz humming through the speakers, polished smiles and wine glasses touching like secrets being exchanged. Liam introduced her. "This is Natalie." A woman across the table looked her up and down, not with interest, but with that subtle arch of the eyebrow that says, "I already know what you are." "Oh, Natalie, nice to finally meet you." Then the smirk, the one people wear when they think they've solved a puzzle that was never theirs to solve. She leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered loudly enough, "She's definitely his type." Fancy. Natalie's lips curved into a soft smile, the kind you learn growing up around people who judge before they listen. She didn't explain the sleepless nights, the contracts she fought to secure, the risk she carried every day as an entrepreneur. She let the comment float, because sometimes silence hurts less than the truth being dismissed. A few weeks later, they attended Liam's friend's housewarming. Modern place. Craft beers. Lots of people pretending their lives were more impressive than they were. And then it came. "So, Natalie, you must be loving Liam's income. Honestly, girl, you hit the jackpot. You look like someone who appreciates a man with a solid paycheck." The group laughed. Natalie felt something shift in her chest. Not anger, a sort of emotional fatigue. Because here's the truth. Being misunderstood is irritating, but being reduced is painful. Liam, sweet but conflict avoidant, glanced at her and then away, mumbling something half-hearted like, "Guys, come on." But half-hearted defenses are just apologies wearing a coat. And Natalie felt it. A room full of strangers had declared her a stereotype, not out of malice, out of laziness. And somehow that stung even more. The drive home was silent. Natalie stared out the window, watching headlights smear across the glass like smudged memories. When they parked in her driveway, she didn't get out immediately. She sat there, holding her breath, feeling a tightness in her chest she couldn't name. Then, softly, she exhaled. "Why do people think my worth depends on a man's wallet?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the night, and the truth followed right behind it. Why am I letting strangers define a life they know nothing about? Sometimes the pain isn't the insult itself, it's the way it makes you shrink. Quietly, 1 inch at a time, Natalie was slowly disappearing in rooms that couldn't contain the size of her truth. She just didn't know yet that the shrinking would stop soon, because one night, one dinner, one joke, one final careless comment would force her to unmask the version of herself she had kept hidden for years. The version they never expected. The version they couldn't laugh at. The version they couldn't dismiss. Natalie Rowan didn't rise from comfort. She rose from scarcity. And that kind of rise, it leaves marks no one sees. While people whispered about her being lucky to have Liam, they had no idea how many nights she had spent fighting her way out of the life she was born into. They didn't know how brutal the climb had been. They only saw the woman at the top, never the girl at the bottom. Natalie's first business wasn't glamorous. It was a tiny consulting hustle she started in a cramped studio apartment where the heat barely worked in winter. She'd sit on the floor, laptop on a milk crate, wrapping herself in 2 blankets while sending pitch emails to companies she knew would probably ignore her. Her mother would call between shifts, exhausted. "Baby, don't burn yourself out. You're doing too much." But Natalie knew if she didn't fight for herself, life would swallow her whole. When she finally landed her first paying client, she cried for 20 minutes straight. Not because of the money, but because someone finally said yes to a girl the world had always underestimated. She worked 14-hour days, woke up before dawn, fell asleep with her laptop open beside her like a guardian she couldn't afford to lose. She didn't inherit wealth. She built it with hands that were shaking half the time. But none of that fit the story people told about her now. By 30, Natalie had 6 companies under contract. By 32, she signed the deal that made her a millionaire. Her employees praised her. Clients trusted her. Her accountant joked that she worked like she was still broke. And maybe she did, because some wounds stay, even when the struggle ends. But here's the irony. The more she succeeded, the more she hid it. Not because she was ashamed of the achievement, but because she'd already tasted how quickly people twist a woman's success into a threat. Liam didn't know she was a millionaire at first. Not because she hid it from him, but because she hid it from everyone. She'd been called arrogant once, called intimidating, called too independent, and the words stuck. They stayed under her skin like old glass. So she kept her wealth quiet, kept her victories private, kept her power small, discreet, invisible. And for a while, that worked. Until it didn't. One Sunday evening, a message popped up in the family group chat. "We should plan a little trip. Liam, can you afford it? Maybe Natalie can chip in. She looks like she likes the fancy stuff." The message was followed by laughing emojis. Natalie stared at the comment, feeling something inside her crack. A long, thin fracture that had been forming for months. She wasn't hurt because they underestimated her. She was hurt because she let them. She had made a home inside a version of herself that was too small, too quiet, too easy to dismiss. She'd let people think she lived off a man's paycheck. When she was paying salaries for 12 other people, she felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. Not anger, a kind of deep, emotional fatigue that bends the back of anyone who's been misunderstood too long. Because when you've built your life from the ground up, being accused of climbing on someone else's shoulders cuts deeper than anyone realizes. Liam cared about her, truly, but good intentions don't erase emotional blindness. He didn't defend her enough. He didn't correct people. He didn't see how deeply those comments were cutting. To him, they were just jokes. But to Natalie, they were attacks on her identity, attacks on every sacrifice she'd ever made, every risk she'd ever taken, every night she'd cried over invoices and deadlines. just to keep her dream alive. She loved him, but she needed him to understand something. When the world mocks a woman for being a gold digger, they're not just mocking her. They're mocking her entire journey. And that is something she can't allow anymore. It came unexpectedly. Another dinner, another table, another night where people laughed louder than the truth. Natalie walked into the room wearing a simple black dress. Nothing flashy, nothing extravagant. And still, the whispers came. She must be expensive to keep. Liam's spoiling her. Look at her. No way she's not after his money. The words floated through the air, like poison disguised as perfume. Natalie felt her heartbeat change. Slow, steady, decisive. She wasn't angry. She wasn't hurt. She was done. Truly, completely done. Something inside her, something strong, something ancient, something she had buried for too long, finally stood up, and the revelation that would silence the entire room was forming on her tongue. But not yet. Not here. Not in this moment. First, she needed to breathe, to choose her words, to decide whether to finally tell the truth or walk away forever. The night everything changed didn't start as dramatic. It began the way most painful moments do, quietly, almost politely. It was Liam's family dinner. A long table dressed in white linen, silverware placed with military precision, and a room full of people who believed they already knew who Natalie was. Natalie arrived with a calm expression, but something inside her had shifted. She wasn't bracing anymore. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't trying to blend into the background of her own life. She walked in fully, shoulders back, eyes clear, present. Liam noticed it first. He touched her arm and whispered, "You okay?" She nodded. What she didn't say was, "I'm done being who they need me to be. It's time to show them who I actually am." Dinner began the way these dinners usually did. Small talk, forced laughter, subtle glances. Then someone at the far end of the table raised their glass. To Liam, they said, for finally settling down with a woman who appreciates a good provider. A few people laughed. Someone added, "Yeah, Natalie definitely knows how to pick 'em." Another voice chimed in, "Nothing wrong with a little gold digger energy. We all gotta survive, right?" The laughter was louder this time, sharper, more confident. Natalie didn't look down, didn't fidget, didn't fold into herself like she used to. She simply placed her fork down with a soft clink that somehow felt louder than every joke they'd made about her. Liam froze. He glanced at his family, then at Natalie, his face flushing with embarrassment. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words stumbled, collapsed, died. The room didn't wait for him. Someone else chuckled. "Come on, Liam. Don't be shy. You know how it looks." And that was it. Something in Natalie's chest, a thin thread she had stretched for months, finally snapped. Natalie reached for her glass, took a slow sip of water, and then looked directly at the person who had made the joke. Her voice was soft, unshaken, too calm for the moment. "Actually, I'm curious," she said. "What do you think I do for a living?" The man blinked, startled, then smirked. "I don't know. Look pretty? Shop? Keep Liam motivated?" Laughter, wider this time, even more confident. Natalie nodded once, a small, polite gesture that felt eerily like the final click before a door locks. She folded her hands on the table and spoke with a quiet strength that cut through every sound in the room. "I run my own company." Silence. Only for a moment, brief disbelief. Someone scoffed softly. "Okay. Doing what?" Natalie didn't flinch. "Strategy consulting. I have 12 employees, 6 corporate contracts, and last year my firm generated just over $1.8 million. The air shifted so fast. Someone actually stopped chewing mid-bite. She continued, still steady. "So if anyone here is dating someone for financial gain," she gestured gently toward Liam, her tone warm but unwavering. "It's definitely not me." The entire table froze. Glasses half raised, eyes wide, mouths parted. The laughter that had filled the room just seconds earlier evaporated like it had never existed. It wasn't just the silence. It was the discomfort, the realization, the guilt, the sudden shift in power. They had misread her. All of them. So badly it was almost embarrassing to witness. One woman cleared her throat. Another adjusted her napkin like it had personally offended her. Someone else whispered, very quietly, "She's the millionaire?" Natalie didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't savor the moment, because this wasn't pride speaking. This wasn't revenge. This was exhaustion. Exhaustion from being underestimated. Exhaustion from being labeled. Exhaustion from having her worth measured by people who had never built anything. She simply said, "I'm not with Liam for money. I'm with him because he's kind." And that was the first time anyone in that room actually listened to her. Liam stared at her like he was seeing her fully for the first time. A mixture of pride, shame, awe, and regret flickered across his face. He whispered, "Natalie, I had no idea you'd." She gently cut him off. "I wasn't hiding. I was just tired of people assuming." Liam swallowed hard, his eyes finally meeting hers with a depth he'd never shown at these dinners. It was the look of a man who finally realized he had failed to protect the woman he loved from the people he loved. And then it happened. The inevitable shift. The same people who mocked her minutes ago began trying to recover. "Oh wow. That's impressive, Natalie. You should have said something earlier. We didn't know you were, successful." She simply replied, "You didn't ask." The words landed like truth always does. Soft, but undeniable and uncomfortable. For the first time, the room wasn't laughing at Natalie. It was respecting her. Because respect, for some people, only comes after humiliation forces them to confront their assumptions. But Natalie didn't feel victorious. Not at all. She felt relieved, like she had finally stepped out of a costume she never agreed to wear. And in that moment, she knew things would never be the same again. Not with Liam, not with his family, not with herself. Because once you tell the truth out loud, you can't go back to being small. The room was still tense when the plates were cleared away. Everyone was suddenly polite, overly so, almost painfully so, as if courtesy could erase the months of condescending looks and whispered judgments. But Natalie wasn't waiting for apologies, and she wasn't interested in redemption arcs. She'd learned long ago, people don't respect you because you explain yourself. People respect you because you finally stop trying. After the dinner, Natalie and Liam stepped outside into the cool night air. She took a deep breath and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not the soft, fragile kind, but the sharp, liberating kind that arrives when the truth finally breaks through all the lies. Liam walked beside her, quiet, shaken from the revelation and the silence that followed it. He finally spoke. "Natalie, I'm so sorry. I should have defended you. I should have." She turned to him gently. "Liam, it wasn't your responsibility to convince them of who I am. It was mine to stop pretending their opinions had power." Liam lowered his eyes, not out of guilt, out of understanding. For the first time, he could see how heavy the pressure had been, how much she had held inside, how deeply it had affected her, even when she smiled through it. As they walked to the car, Natalie said something she had been carrying for too long. "I've been making myself smaller so no one would feel threatened by me." Liam looked up, stunned by the blunt honesty. "I didn't want your family thinking I was using you," she continued, "so I hid everything I built. I hid the struggle. I hid the success. I hid parts of myself I should have been proud of." Her voice didn't shake. "This wasn't emotion. This was clarity. I dimmed my own light so insecure people could stay comfortable." Liam reached for her hand. "You shouldn't have had to do that," he whispered. Natalie looked forward, her voice low but unbreakable. "I know, and I won't ever do it again." The next week, things were different. Some people from the dinner tried to make small talk with her, as if proximity to her success suddenly made them friendlier. Others avoided eye contact, embarrassed by the harsh mirror she'd held up. A few tried to overcorrect. "Natalie, you're amazing. You're such an inspiration. Teach me how to start a business." But Natalie didn't fall for the pendulum swing of their approval. She knew something essential now. People who misjudge you will often admire you the moment you stop needing their approval. Hypocrisy wears many faces. Insecurity even more. She didn't hold grudges. She didn't seek revenge. She simply created distance. Some people don't deserve access to your life, not because they're bad, but because they're emotionally lazy. One night, while sitting on her couch with a cup of tea, Natalie had the realization that marked the turning point of her entire story. Explaining yourself to the wrong people is just another form of self-betrayal. Every time she tried to justify her worth, she was handing pieces of her identity to people who didn't care enough to understand. Every time she stayed silent to avoid conflict, she was agreeing to be small. Every time she let a joke slide, she was laughing at a version of herself she didn't recognize. And for the first time, she could admit this truth without shame. Their judgment didn't hurt because she believed them. It hurt because she once feared they might be right. That fear was gone now, burned away, replaced with something steadier: dignity. The final lesson she carried forward. Natalie didn't change how she spoke. She changed who she spoke to. She didn't change her story. She stopped telling it to people who weren't listening. She didn't change her worth. She simply stopped discounting it. And perhaps most importantly, she stopped treating strangers' assumptions like facts, and started treating her truth like a boundary. From then on, she lived differently. She celebrated her wins openly. She invested in herself without guilt. She wore the watch she loved without hiding her wrist. She walked into rooms without apologizing for the space she took, because she understood something people spend a lifetime trying to learn. Peace isn't found in being understood. Peace is found in no longer needing to be. There comes a moment in every person's life when you must decide: will I continue letting others define me, or will I finally write my own narrative? Natalie chose herself, not out of pride, but out of survival. And if you're watching this, you already know the truth. You've been shrinking. You've been explaining. You've been trying to convince people who don't want to understand you. But you don't have to keep doing that. You are allowed to grow without permission. You are allowed to walk away without guilt. You are allowed to be bigger than their assumptions. Just like Natalie. Conclusion: the awakening. Walk away from the version of you that others invented. There is a moment in every story, a quiet, nearly invisible moment, where everything changes. For Natalie Rowan, it wasn't the night she revealed she was a millionaire. It wasn't the silence that swept across the table. It wasn't even the shock on their faces when they realized how deeply they had misjudged her. The real transformation happened later, alone, in the stillness of her living room, where truth always speaks the loudest. She sat there with a blanket wrapped around her legs, a soft glow from the lamp warming the corner of the room, and she finally understood something that had taken her a lifetime to learn. She didn't need to be defended. She needed to be seen by herself. All those rooms she walked into shrinking, all those jokes she swallowed, all those moments she let people decide her story for her, they weren't signs of weakness. They were signs of survival. But survival isn't living, and she was done surviving. Natalie closed her eyes and breathed deeply, not to calm down, but to come back home to herself. She whispered, "I will never again let small minds decide the size of my life." That sentence changed her completely, quietly, irreversibly. Because once you speak the truth out loud, your spirit refuses to go back to its cage. Watching her reclaim herself changed Liam as well. Not because he felt guilty, but because he finally realized what partnership truly means. Standing beside someone, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's awkward, even when it forces you to confront the people you love. He began to speak up, to draw boundaries, to protect her peace, as fiercely as she had learned to protect her own. Because loving someone isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about joining them in the battle for their dignity. After everything, the world around Natalie didn't magically change. Some people still whispered. Some still judged from the shadows. Some still clung to their insecurities like armor. But Natalie? She walked differently, head high, spine steady, self-respect in every step. And this time, the whispers didn't touch her. They broke against her like waves against stone. Because people can only bruise you where you still doubt yourself. She didn't doubt anymore. As the story closes, there is one question the viewer cannot escape. Where in your life are you letting others shrink you? Where are you dimming your light to keep someone else comfortable? Where are you hiding your success because you fear their reaction? Where are you allowing yourself to be misunderstood because the alternative requires strength you haven't claimed yet? Your story doesn't change when people understand you. Your story changes when you understand you.